Are you ready?
Activate.
Sequence start 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Shadows in the Dark. I am your host, Jeremiah Greer, and we are going to have a great show tonight. We're going to be inviting Penny Kelly here in just a few minutes to talk about one of her books called Robes, a book of coming changes, where she was visited by 7 little people in brown robes. Going to be very interesting, and I'm sure we're going to get into her other book as well, Consciousness and Energy Volume 1, but that is here in just a few minutes. I guess everyone is probably watching the Super Bowl right now. I'm sure that is the big thing going on at this moment. Seems like the score is 20-14 with the Steelers leading. Now, me personally, I'm not a football fan, but I got something in the mail the other day that tied into the Super Bowl. And I am sure we'll be doing that here in just a little bit. I guess how long is left? Around 7 minutes or so. I received a envelope from the Professor Slim King. If you've been listening to the show for some time, then you know exactly who I'm talking about. He is our mentalist, illusionist that has been on the show a couple of times and really, really has amazed our listeners. Well, he had called me up, said, I'm sending you something in the mail. Do not open it until after the Super Bowl is over. So I have a priority mail envelope here that is still sealed from the Professor Slim King. I am assuming that it is probably a Super Bowl prediction. I don't know, but I've had this actually for a couple days now. It looks like it was sent off on January the 28th, and I received it, I believe, Saturday, as a matter of fact. Yesterday, or Friday one. I'm not real sure, to be honest. But we will, once the Super Bowl ends, we will crack this baby open and see what is inside. Now, I'm not sure if the professor will be joining us tonight at some point. He might be. We will see if he shows up in the chat room or not, because he said that he will try to get by as we open up this envelope. So I'm interested. We'll see what's in there. Like I said, I'm assuming it's a Super Bowl prediction, but with the Professor Slim King, you never really know. So we'll get to that in just a bit. Well, as a matter of fact, we'll get to that in probably around 7 minutes or so. All right, well, we've got a little bit of news for you. Well, let me do something. I apologize. If I seem a little off my game tonight, I have been very sick all day. It seems that the family is sharing a stomach virus, and I am the last recipient of that. So today I pretty much just laid around in the bed, and I still feel pretty rough, but I didn't want to cancel tonight's show. I still wanted to go on with Penny Kelly coming on and the envelope as well. I still felt we needed to do tonight's show. But before we get into the news, I just want to remind everybody, if you sign up for our newsletter, be sure to check your trash box, your spam box, or anywhere that mail like that email gets sent to, because sometimes when you sign up and you get the confirmation email, they will get sent to those boxes because it gets flagged as spam mail. Many newsletters do that, but once you sign up or you tell it it's not spam, or you put us on a contact list, or whatever the case may be, you're pretty much good to go. So just make sure to do that if you do sign up for the newsletter. The newsletter is free to sign up for. We try to send it out once a month, if at all possible. You can also sign up for our show reminder. We try to send those out about 2 to 3 hours before each show. But just go to www.shadowsinthedarkradio.com, and you'll see the button there that says Newsletter Show Reminder. Just click on that and fill out the information. All right. Well, let's get into some news, see what's going on around the world. I only picked up a few news stories this time around. Like I said, I've been kind of feeling rough today. but some interesting stories. So police forces have spent, this is an interesting, we want to talk about, the economy kind of being in the toilet right now. Well, maybe here's one of the reasons. Police forces have spent more than £20,000 on cardboard cutouts of uniformed officers designed to confuse criminals. It was billed as the latest police tactic to combat crime, and now the idea has taken off nationwide. West Midlands Police said it had ordered 80 cardboard constables at a cost of just over £10,000. Now, if you not getting this story is out of the UK, by the way. In Derbyshire, £6,650 was spent over the past 2 years on a substantial number of cutouts. A survey using the Freedom of Information Act revealed that 13 forces in England and Wales have used cardboard officers. Essex Police said it spent around £760 on 8 cutouts. They have been deployed in petrol stations to keep drivers from speeding away without paying for their fuel, and also in shops to discourage shoplifting. The force would not reveal precisely where the cutouts have been placed because to release locations is likely to jeopardize the success of the trials. The other forces which have used cutouts are North Wales, South Wales, Greater Manchester, Durham, Humberside, Lancashire, Avon and Somerset, Norfolk, and Surrey. Rank and file officers, however, have questioned the wisdom of spending police funds on fake officers. So, if you're over in the UK and you're running around the local convenience store there and you see an officer standing there, it could possibly be just a cardboard cutout. That's kind of interesting, huh? All right, and well, I have to say, knock in the chat room there saying, is it a cop killing if you set fire to a cardboard constable? That's a good question. All right, here the next story. A new bath mat made of moss is kept alive by water that drips from your body as you dry. The mat contains a total of 70 pieces of ball, island, and forest moss measuring 2.4 inches each in diameter. It feels soft underfoot and does not smell when it gets damp. Each piece of moss is cut from a foam frame, which prevents the moss from spreading or growing out of control. Its designer, Gwen Chan from Switzerland, says the mat is very relaxing and needs little care. She said the idea was to find a new way of having your plants inside. Miss Gwen is looking for financial backing so she can mass-produce the mat for less than £220 it cost her to make. So I'm wondering, I usually don't get snippy on here, but maybe I can use my sickness to say that. But has not Miss Chan there ever heard of potted plants? All right, our last story of the day. Archaeologists in Israel have discovered what they believe is the bust of a Roman boxer from the 2nd or 3rd century. The archaeologists believe a merchant family from the eastern part of the Roman Empire most likely passed down the precious object through the generations until the 4th or 5th century, when an unfortunate family member had it with him at a public building, perhaps a hostel, and an earthquake struck. A team has been digging up the building in the city of David, part of Jerusalem. I'm a big archaeology fan. I really enjoy doing those little news stories. Little news stories, on archaeological finds and whatnot. But I tell you what, we're going to have a great show tonight. So we already have some folks jumping in the chat room. If you are out there listening live via a stream and you're not in the chat room, please make sure to join us in there. All you have to do is just go to shadowtalkradio.com. And for those football fans out there, if you're not tuned into the Super Bowl, it is 20-14 with a little over 5 minutes to go. So that means a little over 5 minutes before we crack open that envelope and see exactly what the Professor Slim King has sent to us. So we're going to take a quick little break, and like I said, when we return, we're going to be talking with Penny Kelly about her books Conscious and Energy and Robes, a book of coming changes. And hear this story, amazing story of these 7 little people that visited her in brown robes and told her about some upcoming changes. So stay tuned.
Johnson, Paranormal Outsider, here with a question. Are you a fan of ghost, history, or writers, mediums, TV celebrities, demonologists, and EVP specialists? What would you give or do to meet and greet top TV celebrities such as Chris Fleming, Patrick Burns, Chip Coffey, Tiffany Johnson, Dave Schrader, John Zaffis, the cast of Scared TV, Adam Bly, Barry Taft, Stacey Jones, the Constantinos, Scotty Roberts, Vince Wilson? Well, before you give up on that new piece of investigative hardware, check out Northeastern Paranormal Investigations Phenomenology 101, March 26th through the 28th in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. This 3-day event includes a reception to meet and greet the celebrities, lectures, vendors. Limited tickets are available for investigations of 3 haunted locations in Gettysburg you won't want to miss. Still not convinced? What if I told you we have got special rates for the Eisenhower Hotel in historic Gettysburg, located on the 3rd day battlefield? Go to www.northeasternparanormal.org for all the ticket information and tell them Old Hip sent you.
In 1988, Penny Kelly began teaching in an old barn in Lawton, Michigan that eventually became Lily Hill Farm and Learning Center in southwest Michigan. Today she teaches a variety of classes and workshops on the topics of intuition, gardening, food, and nutrition, and she is joining us tonight. Penny, how are you tonight?
I'm great. Good to be here.
Well, wonderful. It is a pleasure to have you on, and I do want to say, I know we had to reschedule our last show, and I really appreciate you being understanding, and very close to having to reschedule tonight's as well. So, but we're here, and that's great. I feel fine, and it is such a pleasure to have you on, and I think this is going to be a very interesting topic. I know the main topic of discussion is going to be your book, Robes, a book of coming changes, and hopefully we'll even get into consciousness and energy. But before we do so, I gave just briefly there a little bit about yourself. Can you elaborate on that some more for us?
Well, I think probably what I would say at this point is that my life did not go as I planned. And in fact, I didn't have much of a plan in the beginning. And it's been, I think, far more interesting than what I would have set up for myself. Over the course of the last 30, 40 years, I've had some pretty interesting things that have happened, even though they've happened to me, and most of the time I'm just stuff to be done. Every so often I step back and I look at what has occurred and think, wow, that was something to be dealing with. So I've had a full-blown experience of Kundalini, what they call unity consciousness, and it changed my life. And so here I am today doing things that I never would have dreamed of.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. Then, and this story behind Robes is very fascinating. And let's go ahead and kind of get into it. And
okay,
it's I guess what we're talking about here is you were visited by 7 little people in brown robes. All right.
Sounds weird, doesn't it?
Well, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
No, it is. It's a very interesting story. It's and what these people came to share with you, and so let's kind of talk about when they first came to you, and exactly how that took place, and also someone is asking how little, and I think that is kind of important because I live around Cherokee, North Carolina, so we hear the Cherokee little people that are very, very little, but we're not talking like a foot high or something.
No, these were beings, very, very bright, extraordinarily brilliant beings who were probably about as tall as I was, or a little shorter. And I'm about 5'3.5", maybe 5'4" with my shoes on. And they were generally maybe 5 feet, 5'2", 5'3". They were, I don't think any of them were taller than me. Mm-hmm. So these were beings who appeared and disappeared out of my living room or my kitchen or whatever, and always said the same thing. We have some pictures we would like to show you. Would you be willing to look at our pictures? And so after not very gracefully starting, first visit was, in fact, I was quite freaked out. Second visit, I was really rude. And then finally, when they showed up again, I thought, okay, all right, what are you guys doing back here? And there were a lot of phenomena that were happening at that time. And so for me, it was just another thing happening in the theater of perception. So I sort of went with it. I was doing having some extraordinary experiences, and these were just part of that set of extraordinary experiences. And I didn't realize at the time how grateful I was going to be later that they showed me what they did show me. It took a long time for me to reach that point of gratitude. And, in the beginning, I think I was really overwhelmed by the information. And then I went through a period where I was totally disbelieving, thinking, no, that's never going to happen. And now that I see it happening out there in the world, I go, oh, wow.
Well, let's. I want to talk a little bit about your first meeting, because I have to ask, being that they were, around 5 feet tall. For me, if I would have turned around and 7 people were in my house around 5 feet tall, I would have all of a sudden thought, well, I got 7 monks that just broke in. Where's the phone? Now, compared to if they were about a foot tall. So when you first seen these, what was kind of that feeling, that reaction? I mean, was it comforting?
No.
Yeah.
No. I was upset. I was afraid. They were extremely bright. I had the perception instantly that here was something otherworldly happening. And I was busy peeling potatoes right at that moment, and I was just not open to dealing with another perceptual anomaly, and I was having a lot of them. I was in and out of the body constantly. I was able to be in 2 and 3 places at once. I was seeing things in the future, seeing things in the past, and so the appearance of these little men in brown robes was just another thing in this whole series of very strange experiences. And in my first book, I do outline the terrible fear that I had. I just thought I was going crazy, and it took a long time to get past that. But I did, get a little freaked out, and I did, start yelling at them, go away, and I ran off to the bedroom and tried to hide in the bedroom, and they just basically were very polite and very businesslike, and they said, sorry, we didn't mean to upset you, we'll be back when you're a little bit calmer. And so I was greatly relieved when they left.
So, but you did sense that this was something beyond normal, that these weren't just, everyday people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they were all bald. That was, I thought, very unusual. They all looked a little bit different, but there were there was this light that filled the entire room, and they were wearing these brown robes that came all the way to the ground. All I could really see was their head and these robes, and I just thought that was too freaky for words. And then, the second time they came back, I just ignored them. I refused to look at them. I refused to acknowledge that they were there. I thought, they'll go away. I don't want anything to do with these guys. I don't know what they are. I don't know what my mind is doing to me, but they'll go away.
Mm-hmm. Now, so how many times in total did they visit?
I did not really keep track all that well, but I'm pretty sure that there were about 18 visits, maybe 19 altogether. There were, I'm going to say maybe 16 that were, 16 that were productive. The first 2 visits I did not count as very productive. In fact, I wasn't thinking of productivity at all.
So it was on the third visit that you really kind of opened up to them and let them kind of say what they had came to say. So what happened on that third visit?
I think in the third visit they said that they wanted me to look at their pictures. They said that every single time. And they wanted me to read a particular book, which at the time I thought, what's with the book? And they also, or maybe the first, actually, was very hard to write this book because the visits were not organized, I guess would be the word, quite like I had to write it. We were working telepathically. They were accomplished telepaths. Beyond anything I have ever experienced, and up to that point or since. They would communicate pictures, and they would highlight certain aspects of those pictures. They could literally display a three-dimensional scene right in the middle of my room. And occasionally they would say, step into it and experience it. And a couple times they came, we did not look at pictures. I had what I would call lessons around frequency. So when I came to write the book, I was having to take all of the perceptual, telepathic information and try to organize it in a linear fashion, and that was very difficult. And I struggled with that for a long time. But basically, I think in the first visit, or maybe not the first, we'll say the third, and the fourth visits, they asked me to read a book, and they showed me the Earth as a living being, and that was very disturbing. They basically said, the Earth is not what you think it is, and they showed me some possibilities with that Earth, and I was like, oh no.
Well, that was, the Earth is a living being. I mean, that is an interesting thing. And what exactly did they tell you in regards to this? I mean, as the Earth being a living being, how it should be treated and things along those lines?
Their whole point was that we were living too far away from the reality of Mother Earth. They wanted us to be aware that we were creating a reality that did not take into account the place that we were living and the realities of nature, of wind, of water, of the Earth as a living being, and the fact that the Earth had cycles and things that she went through on her own. And I think in that third visit, they took me out into what I would call outer space, where we just kind of hung out looking back at the planet, and went into the future, and the Earth it wobbled. It made this incredible wobbling, and the oceans were splashing, and whole continents just sort of folded over on themselves, and new land popped up. I mean, it was really very frightening. And they talked. They didn't really talk much, but basically they showed what would happen if the pole shifted 17 degrees, I think was the amount of that first shift that I saw. And it was just a slightly different angle, but by gosh, it was enough to make a huge difference for us here on the planet.
Right.
So,
They get into some amazing stuff, and we're going to get into more detail. But what about the I guess were these? I mean, you called them pictures. Was it? I mean, like, what you would think of, like a Polaroid or something, or was this more of a vision kind of thing?
It was, in almost every case, it was an experience of the actual reality. They were calling it pictures. Once in a while, I would see something that looked like a three-dimensional movie screen unfolding. But a huge majority of the time, there was a combination of telepathic and sensory information coming at me, and I would find myself in the situation, especially when we went into the future, in some of the later visits. Those were fully experiential, and very powerful. Some of the stuff that was a little more on the negative side, the falling apart of our nations and our first world countries, they kind of stayed away from that just a little bit, and I think later on I understood that they wanted me to focus on, and this was their message over and over, we want you to focus on what could be created. Right. You are the creators of your reality. What do you want to create? And I didn't get that at the time. Now I get it. But at the time I was like, what? I was more into victim mentality back then. So, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, you say they were talking about the splitting up of governments, shifts of continents. And, I found that was very interesting to read about because, it was you were going into about the United States splitting up into basically different little countries. Can you tell us a little bit about exactly what they shared with you on that?
There were a number of experiences that dealt with the shift in governments, the way the government would come apart, difficulties that we would encounter. But basically, this was the thing that struck me. They said, you have outgrown the form of democracy that you are currently trying to, make work. And you have to go past that. I thought that was the most amazing thing. It was like, well, what's beyond democracy? There is nothing. And they insisted that there was a form of governance called personal responsibility. And I kept trying to figure out for a long time what kind of government would be called personal responsibility, and then finally the actual word that struck me is like, duh. It's where people come together in small groups to determine what they're going to do and how they're going to do it and how they're going to live, etc. But they did show me the U.S. breaking up the northwest northwest corner of the U.S. broke away, was the first to break away and declare that they wanted no part of what was happening on the East Coast or with the government. There was a breakup that basically included a lot of the southern states. These were just the initial breaks, north from south and east from west, and then the northwest. The East Coast, I believe, it seems to me like Detroit and East was all in one section. West from that line, which went down to maybe, I can't remember if it was Arkansas or Mississippi. Seems like it was Mississippi or along the Mississippi River. That line, everybody west of there was basically something different, and they were in a lot of turmoil. The Midwest actually turned out to be the most stable, but in the beginning they were the most lost because people were breaking away. And then, then it got to be just a huge wave. And those like four major sections, the Northwest, the South, the Upper Midwest, and the East, began breaking up into even smaller and smaller sections. And part of that was just expediency. They didn't have any way to, I guess, connect with the other people. Sometimes there was no communication. There's a lot of stuff that was happening. Food problems, electrical problems, work problems, a lot of stuff coming apart.
Right. Now, Nog from the chat room is asking, did they say when this is supposed to happen, and I'll add to it, or is this something that can be avoided?
They said over and over, you could avoid this if you could get yourselves together. As it stands right now, you are not headed in a direction. You do not have the mindset. You're not able to hold the energy of oneness. They kept focusing on this thing called oneness. However, they maintained all the way through that we could be totally destroyed, or we could use the time as a watershed for total transformation. And they did it, toward the end of the visits, get into what was possible, and that really blew me away.
All right.
So I think we are responsible. We could make it a fabulous transformation or transition. One of the groups that I belong to right now has a concept that they called building the new, and another concept that goes right beside it called hospicing the old. As the old comes apart, you have to sort of take care of those people that are just not going to make the transition to the new. They're going to live out their lives in the old way. And some people will hospice the old while other people will build the new. Mm-hmm. And I see that happening literally in front of my eyes. So I get a little excited, and then I get a little worried, and then I look around and I think, oh dear, So I'm working at this point to really transform consciousness, to do exactly what your fellow is in the chat room is asking. Right. How do we shift consciousness?
Right. All right. I've got a couple more questions from the chat room as well. We'll go ahead and squeeze them in right fast.
Okay.
Carol is asking, did they? I guess you just said, is there a map? But I guess did they give you any kind of map to kind of show these changes?
Yeah. Actually, in my book, I show the preliminary map the way it appeared. Because of the limitations of software, the lines on that look nice and straight, and it wasn't really all that nice and straight and even. Mm-hmm. But generally, I did see several different maps. The initial breakup, and then a secondary breakup, and then a third level breakup. And the same thing, there were lots of difficulties happening in other places in the world. So I did see a lot of different what I would call maps that said, here's what you're facing. Do you want to do anything about it? Are you going to do anything about it? So.
Right. Now, what about, excuse me, did they show you more than just, the United States? Did they show you other worldly changes, global changes in terms of government and whatnot?
Yeah, they did. The United States really struggled badly. Other countries, at first, this is kind of how I'll sort of overview it. The United States sort of hit the wall. Other countries were up and coming. Some were trying to step into the industrial age, and they insisted that other countries should skip the industrial stage altogether and go right to what they called the global network. Now, this was back in 1981 and thereabouts, and I was like, global network? What global network? What are you talking about? So, at that point, I became, there were in fact lots of scenes that I saw this global network working, but to go back to the bigger picture, even though we started out, the United States, having great number of difficulties, and other countries looked like they were going up, it degenerated by about 2020. By about 2015, there was some sort of extraordinary difficulties that involved what they called their version of World War III. Everybody was fighting everybody. Little skirmishes, big attacks, little attacks. Nobody was getting along at all. And they said this is what World War III is going to look like. It's not going to be, a big out-and-out declared conflict. It's just going to be total disintegration because everybody's fighting. And in the process of that, China erupted into a lot of revolution, civil war. There were some terrible things that happened in like the Singapore area and South China area or Southeast Asia area. Europe was having great difficulty, and so it was everywhere. There were difficulties everywhere.
Now, Mr. G from the chat room is asking, do you have any kind of evidence of the visits?
No, don't I wish? No, in fact, when, the visits happened over a period of about a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years. And most of the time, because of my stress of dealing with Kundalini, I just kept wishing they would go away. So finally they did. The visits ended, and I didn't really notice that they had ended. It was some months had gone by and I hadn't seen or heard from them, and I just thought, oh, I haven't seen them in a while. And then, you go on with your life and you forget about it. And that was that for about 10 years and 11 years. And then one night, they showed up and they said, we want you to write down what we showed you. And I was absolutely against that. And, we had quite a discussion. And somehow, I ended up saying, okay, let me see what I can do. So I started, I said to them, I can't remember everything. And they said, what are you talking about? You've been trying to forget for 11 years and you haven't succeeded. So I thought, okay. So it took me about 6 years to write it because I was trying to get I wanted their voice. I wanted their mood. I wanted this cheerful, business-like perspective on something that originally could have been easily a doomsday approach. And I didn't want that because their whole thing was, look what you could create. Look what you could create. What are you wanting to create? So there was really, I take that back. There was one incident that occurred. This was after I finished the book. It really wasn't physical evidence, but I had some people here at the Learning Center who were doing a healing program. And one morning I got up and one of the women who was here, they were here for 2 weeks, these two women. And I got up and I went in the kitchen and one of the women was sitting there looking very disturbed. And so I said to her, Jean, did you sleep well? And she said, no. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. What, is there anything I could do? And she said, well, it was a strange night. She said she woke up in the middle of the night. She thought it was morning because the room was full of light. And she couldn't get her eyes open. So she felt bad, but she went back to sleep and she slept another period of time. And then she woke up a second time and she couldn't get her eyes open, but she was aware that the room was full of light. She said she sort of squeaked her eyes open and closed them again and thought, oh my gosh, it must be getting close to noon already. Why am I so tired? And she went back to sleep. So then she woke up a third time, and at this point she rolled over thinking, oh my God, it must be afternoon. And she looked out the window. We have a big window in the healing room. It's like 4 by 8, and there's a big elm tree right outside that window. And she looked outside, and there, standing in a tree, she said there was this group of little men wearing brown robes, and they were peering in the window as if they were looking for somebody. And I had just the week before that finished the book and then decided I was not going to publish it. was like, this is too outrageous. And, I can't do this. I don't like books of predictions, and people might think it's a book of predictions. So I put it away and was not going to publish it. And as soon as she told me that there's this group of little men in brown robes standing in the tree looking in the window, I thought, oh, okay. I did not, I was trying to convince myself that I had imagined everything because I had no physical evidence other than the experience of it myself. And so I decided to get the book out and go ahead with the publishing.
Well, did, besides her, have you ever heard of anyone else telling a similar story of seeing?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Really?
I was very surprised after the book came out. I'm not at liberty to say who, but a politician called me one day and said, I just want to let you know that I have dealt with your little men in brown robes.
Wow.
They, and I don't dare say anything or my political career would be over in a heartbeat. And I was pretty surprised. And then several other people said to me, oh, this sounds like I think it was the White Brotherhood. And I was not familiar with the White Brotherhood at all. And I said, oh, okay. They said, yeah, we've seen some little men in brown robes, but they're part of the White Brotherhood. And I thought, oh, who's that?
Yeah.
So, which then, caused me to go looking. And so I learned very little, but a little bit about the Brotherhood. And in fact, it does sound like them. So, I was sorry that I did not ask more about them.
Right.
And a couple times I have thought maybe I should go back and try to look them up.
Let's give us your website right fast, so that way if anybody, I know you have the books available, not just robes, but you have also published some other books available on the website as well, correct?
Yeah, we have, I have a very old website. We're in the process of updating it right now, redesigning it. It's lilyhillfarm.org, and it's one L in Lily. So it's LILYHILL farm, FARM.org.
All right. We also have that linked off of our website, so you can just go to www.shadowsinthedarkradio.com if you have any problem finding it, and we have it linked there. Matter of fact, we have I think all your books linked off of there as well.
Oh, okay.
Including robes. So yeah, very very interesting stuff. Just so you know, the Super Bowl is almost over.
Oh, is it?
It is almost over, and it looks like maybe about 15 seconds or so left, and the Steelers, they have swapped the lead a couple of times. It is now Steelers 27, Cardinals 23, so we are probably just a few minutes away from cracking open our envelope.
Okay.
Yes. So I'm kind of interested in what exactly is in that thing. So, well, let's before that happens here, we'll get a little bit more into robes. What did they? I know they told you a lot about the structure of family.
Yeah.
What did they say about family? I mean, is we going to look at changes on how families are toward
Yeah, they were very in fact, they came back to that again and again. I was really shocked with one of their early statements. They said it should be obvious to you that the nuclear family does not work. And I thought that was an outrageous statement back then. But they went on to say, here's the problems, and they had a whole, bunch of stuff that they showed me about problems with families. And they basically said, you've shattered yourselves into these, single parent arrangements, or even double, two parents. They said two people is not enough to raise a child. It is not enough. And they said that we would come around to a point in time where we would return to the extended family, was the term that I chose to use. Although we wouldn't necessarily be blood family. Do you know what I mean? Like people would begin to live together, work together, sometimes, a lot of times in the beginning, was out of necessity. From 2010 through 2050, families were reshaping and reforming tremendously, and people grouped together for survival initially, and then discovered that it worked pretty darn good, pretty darn well. And then they ended up literally sticking together, growing food. Pretty soon they were like, one of the families that I happened to go visit, I asked about the origin of that group and was surprised to have them say that they were originally a lot of former employees of Dow Chemical, which was, a company that I was not really familiar with in detail, but I was aware that it existed. And they had put together like a small community. Somebody did food, a couple families did food, somebody did, took care of houses, wiring, that sort of thing. Somebody else was really taking care of children. Somebody was doing educational stuff with the children. But mainly it was a group of people who used to be part of the corporation who said, let's get together. We have some expertise. We could do this, and that. Everything, there was absolutely zero waste. Nothing was wasted coming out of that family group. They lived and worked in the same place. It was just unheard of in the not-too-distant future to live in one town and go somewhere else to work in another town or another city. That was just considered ridiculous. And so people either built, or some groups actually formed by barricading themselves into a city neighborhood or a town. Lots of towns lost population, and there were lots of houses left. Some of them fell into disrepair, but some other people moved into. And people started working together, saying, what could we do? Well, I know how to do this. Well, I know how to do that. And pretty soon, they were busy manufacturing in their own backyard. And when it came to a choice of whether or not to pollute and destroy Mother Nature, the answer was absolutely not. So they had put in they'd made the kinds of changes that really allowed them to do what they were doing in a way that was completely in accord or attunement with life, which was a big theme that the Little Men brought up again and again, that we were spending far too much time destroying life, and that because of that we would go down with it.
Okay. Well, Penny, let's pause just for a second because
okay.
With the Super Bowl is over, I've got the envelope. Looks like that the professor is most likely in the chat room. And for those who maybe didn't hear us at the beginning of the show, I was sent an envelope from the Professor Slim King, who has been a guest on here, saying do not open until after the Super Bowl is over. So this is postmarked January 28th. It's in a priority mail envelope, and we are going to open this thing up. We're going to see what it says. So actually, here's the actual one. It says, do not open until after Super Bowl. So I could open the priority mail envelope. So I went an extra step. So let's see. So it says, my Super Bowl prediction that I made last week. And he actually gives us a URL to go to. That is YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com/Professor Super Bowl, then I guess we will see a prediction. And I don't know if I can even hear it on here or play it, to be honest. We'll see what happens. We're going to go to it. We'll see what he said here.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't know if we'll actually be able to hear. Usually I plug my mic in, all sound goes off. Super Bowl. Okay, here we go. So youtube.com/Professor Super Bowl. So we are going there now. And it looks like it was posted 1 week ago. And it is titled Stillers by 4.
Oh.
Well, there we go. Look at that.
I'll be darned.
But I can't hear what he's actually saying, so if you're out there listening, make sure to check. I will actually post the link to it, the direct link. The date, somebody's asking the date of the video. Well, it says January 25th, 2009 was when that video was posted. So there we go.
And what was the final score?
It was Steelers 27, Cardinals 23.
Oh, my gosh.
So Steelers by 4.
Steelers by 4.
Steelers by 4. Of course,
All right.
The professor comes through again. I am telling you, this guy is just amazing. He has been on the show doing things like this with us for some time. So I'm going to have to go back and actually listen to what it says afterwards. But obviously, his prediction right on the money again. The Professor Slim King. I am telling you, amazing, amazing guy. We'll have to maybe get him on at some point and just see how in the world. I doubt he's going to tell us how he does it, but you never know, right? You can always.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be the Steelers, even though I wanted it to be the Cardinals. So
yeah, well, it went back and forth there near the end. It changed lead. I think the Steelers were up, and then the Cardinals got ahead, and then the Steelers. There with not much left, as a matter of fact. I think only a couple of minutes. So we have to give it to the professor once again. Right on the money. He predicted Steelers by 4. Just amazing. I'm telling you, it just amazes us all the time. So a week ago, yes, he's actually in the chat room with us. So just amazing stuff. Well, Penny, let's kind of continue on here while everybody's still going, how in the world? So
okay.
Yeah, it's I'm telling you, he always amazes me. So I kind of, Paul, we were talking about the structure of family. Now, what it kind of sounds like, are we looking at, I guess, are you familiar with the stories of Atlantis, and I guess not even that, but even Plato's Republic, where he talks about communities, basically they would raise like the public would raise the children. They didn't have like a mother or father that directly raised them. Are we talking about something similar to that, where family is very extended and that newborn child is everybody's child kind of thing?
Yeah, right. I'm not familiar with the writings about Atlantis, but the structure, a lot of the families, these were called family business neighborhoods. They had anywhere from 200 people to 2,000 people in a family neighborhood. Nobody had the right to have a child if the entire family did not agree. That was a total change from what we have now. You had to make sure that you had all kinds of people who were saying yes, and I will do this, and I will take care of that. The entire group really felt that they wanted to make sure that if a child came into the world, that child was welcomed and wanted, and there was no chance that what they called the bond of oneness that existed between a newborn and its people, they wanted no chance that bond would be broken. They were adamant that we needed to mature spiritually. Tremendous amount of work needed to be done there, because if pregnancy needed to be ended for some reason, they had an entirely different take on that whole issue. There was no one-size-fits-all answer when it came time to aborting a child or anything for any reason, any kind of law. Everything was very seriously looked at in its entirety.
That is interesting. Now, did they speak of anything about the population itself? I mean, we've definitely, heard of the worries of population growing at such a rapid pace that, before too long and not too far in the near future at that we're really considered overpopulated as it is.
Well, they did. That was one of the more disturbing visits or things that I saw, was the drop in population. It dropped just tremendously. It went down to, I can't remember what the exact number was now, but I remember thinking that there were only like 4 million people left, and they corrected me. And they said, no, it's actually much more than that. But there were nowhere near 90% of the population was gone. I was very, very upset at the fact that so many people left, and some of it was disease, some of it was war, a lot of war stuff that was happening. Some of it was just starvation. Food production dropped. People did not have food. They did not have water. But a lot of it was the fact that people were just not having babies anymore. Almost nobody was healthy enough to have babies. And the world was amazingly, I visited 2 specific times in great detail, stepped right into that time. One was toward the end of the 2000s or early 2100, and the other was the year 2413. And it was, the world was just a beautiful place. The focus in life was not on getting an education, getting married, and having a nice family and working your way up the corporate ladder. It was self-development, human evolution. And it was an entirely different, I visited the houses, the homes, the village, the communities, the family business neighborhoods. They were like little villages, and, I was just it was amazing, and I was just amazed by the changes, because I saw a lot of specific changes that I was fascinated by. They were good changes.
Now, we've got some saying in here in the chat room saying that when the message seems kind of grim. Do you see it as grim or as more of a warning? There was a period of time where I really struggled with the grimness, the grim side. And the little man said to me again and again and again, you are here to focus on the build-up side. You stay out of the tear-down. There will be people who will come specifically to take apart the old. You are here to build the new. Stay out of the old. Keep your nose out. Don't write about it. Don't talk about it. Don't ignore it, because that old, in a garden, when you are done with your growing season, you have a lot of leftover plants, and that becomes compost. And what they said was, this is the compost. The lessons that you will learn from what doesn't work will inform the new, and that's where we want you to focus. There will be plenty of people. You will find them who are interested in building the new structures in the new world, and, focus there. If you don't, they said, all you're going to see is destruction, and you will not be able to find enough reason to live if you're focusing on that. So every so often I remind myself of that and think, okay, all right, I'm going to stay on the build-up side. All right. Well, I tell you what, Penny, we were here just at about time to take a break. So we're gonna do that right fast. So all those tune in. We are speaking with Penny Kelly tonight about her book Robes, a Book of Coming Changes, and we're going to continue this discussion as soon as we return. So don't go anywhere. Back in just a few minutes.
Visit www.shadowsinthedarkradio.com today to sign up for our free newsletter, join as a member of our forum, or browse our online store where you can find books, CDs, and DVDs, like a signed copy of The President's Vampire by Robert Damon Schneck, or the complete works of Dr. Gary Frick for only $20. That's 4 books signed by Dr. Frick that carry a great message. You will also find downloadable products like Mysteries Magazine and the Donald Kehoe interviews, DVDs featuring Charlie Carlson and Mr. Lobo. So go to www.shadowsinthedarkradio.com today and be a part of the show.
Have you been wondering what gift to get that special person in your life? Then you need to visit Mountain View Candle Works, your one-stop headquarters for candles, fountains, specialty foods, and much more. Just visit www.mountainviewcandleworks.com. We make your candles with mountain care.
You are listening to Shadows in the Dark, broadcasting live on the Shadow Talk Radio Network at www.shadowtalkradio.com. Shadows in the Dark can also be heard via rebroadcast on the Para-X Radio Network at para-x.com and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at paranormalradionetwork.com. Also available in podcast form at the Black Vault Radio Network at blackvaultradio.com and Planet Paranormal at planetparanormal.com. Well, tonight our guest is Penny Kelly of Lily Hill Farm. We are talking about one of her books, Robes, a Book of Coming Changes. And Penny, before we kind of get back into it, I really wanted you to tell us about Lily Hill Farm. And exactly what you guys, what do you, I guess gals or guys, I don't know what's all there. So what you folks, so let's do that. I'm a Southern, so we'll call you folks.
Okay.
What do you do there?
Well, actually we bought this place in 1987, and I just wanted a place to write in the country where it was quiet. So we bought this farm. It had 57 acres. An old farmhouse, and this ancient barn that was falling down. And after we bought it, I needed to, go make more money, so I took a job as at a school in Florida. So I was commuting to Florida. I was the principal of a school for learning disabled, severely emotionally disabled kids, and commuted back and forth. And while I was gone, my husband was left with the children, and he, within a very short time, said, "Never mind the money, just come home. I will build you a place to work. You can just teach right here." And so he started building this barn, and we worked on, he took the old barn, completely put it back on its foundation, and just completely revamped the whole thing. So we now have a 20,000 square foot building that is a learning center and a retreat center, and we sleep about 25 people, have 25 bed inn or bed and breakfast, whatever you want to call it. And it's a delightful place, and it has an ancient history to the land itself, just an amazing place, amazing history. So Lily Hill Farm became Lily Hill Farm slowly, gradually, and always, has been a place where people come for, they come to my classes in intuition or some of the other classes, or there's yoga retreats or whatever is going on here, and for healing as well. And it's a place that just sort of wraps itself right around your heart and your soul and makes you comfortable.
Oh, that is wonderful. That is wonderful. Well, let's one more time, since we're back. We've had a few more people join us. Give us the website to Lily Hill Farm.
Oh, it's www.lilyhillfarm.org, and there's only one L in Lily.
All right. Well, let's get back into robes. Okay. Like I said, this is very interesting stuff, and I've got a question that come through the chat room there as we were on break from Bambi asking, did they ever say where the seven little people, did they ever say where they come from, or did you ever get that information?
I never asked, and they never said. But after the visits were over, and I was growing spiritually, reflecting back on that, I realized that I have had a tremendous number of experiences in other dimensions of existence with other beings, all sorts of beings. And what I realized is that when an individual awakens, there are beings in the universe of existence who simply make it their business to go around and try to help those people who have awakened reorient their thinking and their perspective. And that was what the little men in brown robes were doing. there is a level of consciousness that we are evolving toward that I have been in, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 times now. I don't know what you want to call it. You could maybe call it God consciousness. You could call it Christ consciousness. You could call it any sort of consciousness. But it is an order of consciousness that is beyond what we can even imagine. When you step into it, you are all-knowing, and you cannot imagine what that is like until you have experienced it. Because when I say you're all-knowing, not only do you know every single person on the globe, in the universe, you know every molecule, you know every thread, you know every, you just know everything and everyone, and you know it all at once without any stress. If I was trying to remember all that, from this level of consciousness, I'd be just totally lost. But when you step into that other consciousness and you're in that light, you open up to this extraordinary knowing of everything that's ever happened and everything that ever will happen. And there are people who wander around, that sounds like a very loose term, but who make it their business to be of service to those who are awakening. And I think that's what the little men in brown robes did for me, was just come and try to help me get a feel for and a view of who I was and where I was going.
Mm-hmm. Now, excuse me there, you had mentioned Christ consciousness, and if I'm not mistaken, they told you that this was something you had to achieve, and you expressed that this scared you?
Yeah, right toward the very end, I think almost the very last visit, they did come in one day, and they said, we would like you to see what you came here to do. And they started talking about Christ consciousness, and I had been very good for 1.5 years, but I freaked at that. I didn't want any part of it. It was like, that's just, I'm not interested. I don't want to be that good, all sorts of things. And so, I ended up leaving the house. I just, they wouldn't leave until I left. And I was upset, and then finally, they came back and they said, this is what you're here to do. And at the time, I just said, I can't do that. I can't, there's just no way that I can do that. I don't know how to get there. I'm not interested, and so I can't do it. And it took me, it's now been, 20-some years, 25, 28 years, 1982 to 2009, so 27 years. And it's just been in the last couple of years that I realized that I was stepping into that kind of consciousness every so often spontaneously. And at that point, realized, this is where I want to be. The joy there, the bliss there is extraordinary. Not to mention the other things, the all-knowing, the ability to transport yourself, which I have done a couple of times. Mm-hmm. That there's nothing that makes up for, in this reality, when you come back to this, you realize how limited you are. And I then began to say, okay, all right, I'm interested, let's start. How do I begin? So I'm on a learning path at this point. I'm always on a learning path, but I'm on a specific learning path at this point.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've got another question from the chat room, and this is actually a couple kind of wanting to know the answer to this, and that was Knock, but he's wanting to go by Captain Bugface, by the way, so...
Okay.
It's his little icon there that he has beside him, as well as TRF, wanting to know why believe them? Why did you believe them?
I didn't in the beginning. Mm-hmm. I didn't. I just was not the least bit interested in getting all caught up in what they were saying. After the visits ended, and I had all the experiences, I went through a long stage where I was looking through the world and saying, I don't see anything happening like that. I don't see this. I don't see, I just was very, very skeptical. So then when I didn't see anything happening for a while, I thought, okay, forget it. I just, I don't know who those guys were, and I don't care, and I don't want to think about it anymore. And then one day, I was watching, I think, a television program or a news program, and they had this man on, and I recognized him instantly because he had this huge port wine stain on his forehead, and it was Gorbachev. And I had seen, through the courtesy of the little men in brown robes, that everything that was going to happen hinged on what Gorbachev did. He was the one who came here to take the first step. He was the first one who was going to say, this isn't working, and disintegrate or allow the disintegration of the USSR, and that the wall would come down, and, blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, all of a sudden, things started happening, and the wall came down, and at that point, I was looking at what was happening in the world and looking at what I experienced with the men in brown robes and thought, oh my God, what if the rest of what they showed me also happens? We need to get ready. We need to change how we live and how we think and why we do what we do. And so I've had, 27 years to be thinking about that and working around those kinds of issues. And it isn't really even a matter of believing them anymore, because eventually what they taught and what I was slow to come to was that you cannot get anywhere if your point of reference is outside yourself. You have to go inside yourself, and you have to say, how do I want to be? Who am I? What am I creating? What do I want to create? And then you start there, and you work outwardly. You don't look out and see something that you could follow or believe in or get on that bandwagon. That does not work. So if you want to mature spiritually, you have to come to listening to the God within, and that leads you to your own truth, and then you act from there.
All right. Now, what kind of effect did this have on your life? Did you start making changes?
Yeah, I did, slowly, and in a very awkward way. I think the bigger picture was that I was struggling so badly with Kundalini. The first Kundalini experiences started probably in 1978, October, November. I had the first taste of it. I didn't recognize what was happening. And then in February 79, the lid blew off, and, I entered into this full-blown experience of stepping into what's called the void, or the I am. And that changed me overnight. Overnight, I was clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, in and out of the body, in 2 or 3 places at once, able to see what was going to happen in a lot of cases, and really struggling with that, because at that point, I was an engineer for Chrysler. I was very left-brained. I wasn't into spirituality. I wasn't into diets. I wasn't into meditation. I wasn't into anything. But I had stepped into a moment of unconditional love. And that is what triggers that awakening of consciousness. There's laws in the universe, and that's one of them. Step into that kind of love, and you're going to experience something dramatic happening. So, you end up in this place where I did, for 5 years, I was struggling with my perception so badly that the little men in brown robes were just one of a number of issues. They weren't the whole thing. And eventually, it took me 17 years to integrate the entire experience and all of the gifts. And it was a painful 17 years, and it changed everything about my life, everything. So there wasn't a single thing that was left the same as it was before.
We've got some asking in the chat room if you could explain a little bit about what exactly Kundalini is.
Yeah. Gosh, do we have 3 weeks? In a nutshell, Kundalini is an ancient Eastern term that stands for the total awakening of consciousness. That for some reason, and I don't really understand why, the symbol of Kundalini is a snake coiled up at the base of the spine. When that snake awakens, so to speak, is the imagery, the ancient imagery, it springs up and bites you in the head. That the medical, the staff that most doctors use, you see a staff with a snake spiraling around it.
Right.
That is actually the ancient symbol of Kundalini, an awakened consciousness. When you have awakened, then you can begin to heal people, and that's how they got that symbol. Kundalini itself, once you have the full-blown experience, you can have different levels of it, but it's a very powerful experience. It's a sexual experience. It is a roaring experience. There's a roaring sound that is unbelievable. And then all of a sudden, what happened for me specifically was I heard this roaring sound, and I thought, oh, that's, we live just down the road from Selfridge Air Force Base, and I thought it was one of the jets getting ready to take off. And then I realized that it was a sound coming from inside me, and for just a moment it's kind of like, huh? And then it's just like a freight train, this pulsed up the center of me, hit what would traditionally be called, I think, the various chakras, although I wasn't familiar with the word chakra at the time either, and then hit my brain and just exploded consciousness so that the entire reality disappeared, and I was floating in this endless space of absolute silence and light, these little twinkling dots of light that just seemed to spread out in every direction as far as I could see, know, and feel. And I knew that I was those lights. And what you know at that second is nothing about your physical reality, nothing about the place that you live, the person that you are. All that disappears. And at that moment, what you know is, I exist. And that is accompanied by a bliss and a satisfaction and a fulfillment that is you can't describe it. It is, if you've tasted it, nothing will compare. You take your best sexual orgasm and it is paltry compared to that moment of bliss. And that happened in February 79, about the middle of the month, and then about 2 weeks later it happened again, and then about 3 weeks later it happened again, and then it started happening all the time. And there would be this rumbling, and my heart would start to pound, and it was a very difficult period. I thought I was going to burst into flame or possibly explode, physically explode. And, after a couple of years of struggling with that, and I couldn't tell, I just couldn't tell where I was at sometimes. People would stand in front of me and I would be looking at them as they were 500 years ago.
Right.
And it's confusing. And so I learned that you have to keep yourself very, very quiet, because any time that I had a question or a curiosity about something or somebody, my mind would go out and get that information and present it to me, and that was the source of the confusion. It was like, where did that? What happened? What happened? Where did he go? Who was that? Well, that's the thing that it just was very difficult. And
now,
then slowly you pull it all together.
Now, how long did these visits take place for? How many years?
Oh, with the little men in brown robes?
Yeah.
I think their first visit was like, maybe January of 1980 or 81. I can't remember if it was 80 or 81. And it took place over about a year and a half to 2 years. They came about once every 6 to 8 weeks. Sometimes there wasn't any real schedule. They just kept showing up. And on the average, it was about, I'd say, once a month or once every month and a half. A couple times they were there, 2-3 weeks apart, and then I wouldn't see them for 7 or 8 weeks. And so, it was just a very loose kind of schedule.
Right. Well, now, did they ever at any point kind of explain our past?
As our meaning who?
Well, I guess us humans, I guess, just, society's past. I mean, did they ever go into that at any point?
Yeah, they did. I did not put that in the book because I just felt that the bigger message was the one that they kept coming back to was, what do you want to create? But there were a lot of pasts for humans. This civilization that we're experiencing now is not the first one. It won't be the last one. I looked at probably at least 4, maybe 5 others. Some much more advanced, some very different, some bigger. The people were bigger. The people were smaller. Some had much more advanced technologies. Some didn't have any technologies. But what I learned, actually I was thinking about putting this in a book. I was just thinking about this 2 days ago. Trying to capture that sense of history that we as human beings have had here on this planet. There's a bit of history in the Bible with Genesis, and God created light or something like that, and then it took 7 days or what have you. That's not the story at all, not even close. It's an allegory that, gets the idea across, but it certainly is not what I would call what literally happened.
That's just some fascinating stuff, I definitely have to say. Now, one of the other things that you had mentioned was the year 2413.
Oh, yeah.
What exactly was the message or what they were trying to get across about 2413? And if I read it correctly, there was something interesting that definitely had to deal with yourself in this.
Yes. They said, we're going to take a look at 2413. And so we, this scene opened up, and I was looking at what appeared to be like a big, dome, or bubble. It was made of some type of what I thought was glass. Turned out it wasn't really, it was some sort of hybrid type glass. But we went inside, and it turned out this was a home for 8 different people. There were 8 different units in this home. A couple people were single, and I was one of them in that time. I was a male, and my name was Dennis at that point. There were other adults who lived in this home. It was just an extraordinary experience of the future. We walked through this living room, I guess you would call it. It was a cross between a living room and a lobby. And when we walked through certain areas, lights came on or went off. There were no lights. There were no lamps in the space. But there were these, they ended up showing me in detail the stuff that this dome-like building was made of. And it was layered glass. And each of the layers did something different. And I remember at the time I was kind of interested because I was still in, just right out of engineering. And they had oriented strand molecules that would transmit electricity through this one layer. And they responded to what your thinking was. So when you wanted to turn on the lights, you had to think and send a particular, and in the early stages you had to look with your eyes. There are 2 blue rays that come out of your eyes. And when you look at something, these oriented strand layers would respond to your eyeballs and the like laser-like rays that come out of your eyeballs, and a light would come on. There were no kitchens. There was a sort of a modified kitchen, but there was no kitchen in the sense that we have kitchens today. There was a sink, and there was a stove, was very tiny, and there was not much in the way of a refrigerator, because almost all the food was grown in this large attached secondary dome that looked, again, like a greenhouse. And you would go in there and you'd pick your food. There was no such thing as eating canned anything. That was just considered a path to death. There was other families. What you got in this particular house was a living space, a bedroom space, and a bathroom space. And I went into the bathroom. It was just an amazing. There was an in-ground pool with a little waterfall. There was a big mirror, floor-to-ceiling mirror. You stood in front of it. You could see your aura. There was a chair in the living space where you could sit in it and put this goggle-like thing on, and you could see and experience all kinds of things that would enhance your own brain development. We went in the healing room. The healing room was this table that you would, you know how when you go to get an X-ray, you would lay on a table and they'd flip this plate in the X-ray table and then take a picture of you. And this was a combination of something like that, but what came out at the end was a schematic of your energy system, and then they would hit that, put you back on the table, and they would activate that schematic with certain lights, and that would pinpoint light acupuncture into your body system and cause healing. It was an amazing experience.
Wow, sounds like it. Now, I've got a question, a little bit of a backtrack question here from TRF in our chat room, asking, I guess, some comments you had made a little bit earlier, saying, were you suggesting that the Bible is incorrect, according to what the 7 little people in robes had said?
Incorrect? I don't know if you could even use that term. It gets the message across, and that, I think, is the message is that, in the Bible anyway, and I'm not a Bible expert by any measure, but the messages in the Bible, I think we need to look at the Bible and say these are inspired writings. When you're developing yourself spiritually, you eventually have to come to this place where you go within to get answers. Within you, there is a being that's called the inner Christ. When that Christ is fully developed, then you can say you have Christ consciousness. When you begin to listen, and you should listen, here's I think the original first commandment. Let me shock a few people. I think the original first commandment, or the one that's published out there, is, I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt not have strange gods before me, or something like that.
Right.
Okay, let's just amend that just a little bit and say, I am is the Lord your God within, and you must not make anything more important than that. That puts the onus on you to go within and communicate with that God within. And if you are given something to tell to somebody else, and you write that down, then you can say, I have written this because it's for the good of all mankind. It is the word that comes from my God within. I think the Bible is a lot of that kind of thing, and I don't think we are sophisticated or spiritually mature enough to recognize what that word or that term, the Word of God, actually means. So we think it's, somebody out there, I'm not sure, with a gavel and a book and a pencil who's passing judgment here and there, and that's not at all what the I am is, which is what God is.
Right. Now, what did they say about, like, Well, I think I guess we kind of already touched that. I apologize.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm just kind of going. Here we go. I thought we had another question from the chat room. So here, Mr. G is asking about human reproductive rituals. Did they change at all?
Yeah.
Or do they change?
Men and women still got together, and and they had love relationships. But the thing that if you're talking strictly, did they go about sex in some other manner, or did they do test tube things? Almost always it was the male-female coming together. Mm-hmm. Usually there was a period, if somebody said, I want to have a baby, there was a period in which that would be discussed in the within the family business neighborhood. Parents, the prospective parents, would go on a very special diet, and then they would not go about actually getting pregnant until they had connected with the being who would inhabit the body. That, I thought, was a huge change from the way that we do it now. Now you just get pregnant and, boom, you have a baby, and nobody ever thinks about who's living in that body. The period not too far in the future was that whole thing about reproductive attitudes and approaches was different in that they recognized that a body was just a body until someone inhabited it. And so that was, I thought, very different. And then once the pregnancy began, sometimes the parents would always be in contact with whoever was the being who was coming to be with them, and so were others. There were people within the family who would contact them when the connections were going very well. The baby would be born, and it would almost be like they were greeting an old friend. Mm-hmm. We don't do that now. So, but there wasn't a lot of test tube stuff. Although when there was one or two visits where I was way in the future, and it was obvious that they were not doing sexual reproduction at all. Right. In the way that we do it. They were literally manifesting a pregnancy, and a lot of things were being manifested, not just human beings, but pieces of houses were being. I watched them synthesize some of these things out of thin air. Same thing with foods. A lot of stuff, very different. Transport, extremely different. Communication, very different. Education, amazingly different. Healing, different. A lot of it just very much more advanced than what we are doing today. And yet I see the seeds of it coming as I watch things unfolding. I'm like, ooh, yeah, all right.
Well, there's a question from Night Owl asking, have you read any of the apocryphal texts of the Bible? She's saying that they're thinking of the Book of Thomas in particular, which does a lot of covering of certain people being godlike.
No, I haven't read any of those. And the Gospel of Thomas, I have been curious about that myself. I would like to read that. What I think the message that Jesus had for us, which totally got messed up, and as time went on, but the message was, look, people, see what I'm doing? You can develop yourself, and here's how you do it. Right. And, he said that you can get to the point, you can evolve to the point where you are beyond death. And if you don't believe me, I'll show you how. I'll get myself crucified, and I'm going to come back and say, ha, here I am, see? And he did that, and he did that beautifully. And, I think that it's up to us to suddenly wake up and say, hey, you know what? I think it's time to begin developing myself. So we have a huge amount of potential that we are not addressing and dealing with. And certainly part of that potential is the ability to enter into what's called eternal life. And when you read about that now, most people think, oh, he's talking about heaven, after I'm dead. Well, eternal life doesn't say anything about being dead. Life is life. It doesn't include the concept of death. And that was one of the things the little men in brown robes said was you're going to come to a point in your future when you're going to have to choose whether you're going to align with life or align with death. And if you choose death, then you don't have to do anything different. You're already on that path. You're basically going to end up dead. If you choose life, then everything you do and everything you create has to sustain, has to nurture, has to carry forward life. And that's every word, every thought, every action. And at the time I was like, oh man, that's a lot of work. So, but I think it can be done.
Hmm. Well, if you're just tuning in, we are speaking with Penny Kelly tonight of Lily Hill Farm. We are discussing one of her books, in particular, Robes, a book of coming changes, where she was visited by 7 little people in brown robes that shared some changes of the world that were basically coming to be if we didn't maybe change our ways. I got a couple more questions from the chat room here. It seems like a lot are coming through. So this one coming from Captain Bugface there.
Okay.
Wanting to know what books you have read and what books have influenced you as well.
Let's see. Oh gosh, I've read a lot of books. I think, oh dear, where to begin? Okay, when Kundalini first started, and I was struggling badly, somebody gave me a Carlos Castaneda book. So I started reading those, and I started reading the first one anyway, and I just want to say that it is common in the early stages of Kundalini to be unable to read at all. And so my ability to read degenerated into got to a point where I just couldn't read. I couldn't focus. I didn't have to read. And if you read my book, Evolving Human, you'll see that I finished my senior year in college, which I was facing right at that point in time, by putting the book beside the bed and focusing on it, and and I would be able to pick up all the ideas in the book. So I did my entire senior year sort of in a non-traditional fashion, if you will. About 3 or 4 years ago, somebody sent me a Seth book, and I was just thrilled with that. I ended up reading most of the Seth books and thinking, yes, this matches my experience, so I would highly recommend the Seth books. I have read Hank Wesselman's books, Spirit Walker, Vision Seeker, I think, and Medicine Maker. And I think Spirit Walker is the first one, and I often recommend that people read that. Let's see. I haven't really read nearly as much as I would like to because I'm too busy writing books. But I pick up books here and there. I've read a lot of stuff that other people would not be interested in. Stuff on the brain. My whole expertise is on the brain structure, brain function, and all of that kind of thing. And so, I do have on my website, on lilyhillfarm.org, I have a list of books that I recommend people get and read if they're looking to develop themselves spiritually.
Oh, wonderful. Another question. This one is from Mr. G again. I got to scroll up and find it here.
Okay.
Do humans evolve different limb or body configurations, or do they get genetic plastic surgery?
What? Say that again. Do humans what?
I guess in some of the visions that you had of us in the future, did we evolve different limb or body configurations? Are we pretty much the same? Or do we get genetic plastic surgery?
No, actually, no to both. We did not evolve different body configurations to any great degree. People looked pretty much the same, in the time frames that I was visiting anyway. But there was a tremendous difference by the time we got to 2413, and that was that people were barely aging. They were living much, much longer. And when I say much longer, I'm talking 200, 300 years. And they were working on even longer. People did not age. One of the things that I think is noteworthy was the way that children were raised was very different. And one of the things the little men in brown robes said to me as part of their lecturing was, you're wrecking your children. Why do you think children about the age of 3 or 4 think that anything is possible? And, and so I was like, I don't know. And they said, because it is. And you force them to accept this entire array of limitations and half-truths and lies, and you short-circuit their potential. And when I went into the future, I had an eye out, because I have 4 children of my own, and I was looking for, what are they doing differently with their children? And that was a very concerted effort, was to develop the self so that we could develop the children. Nobody wanted the children to be more developed than the adults, because the question was, how are we going to control them? And so there was a huge effort to develop the adults, and that resulted in much slower aging, much better health, much better consciousness, and then the children were being raised to explore their own potential and to, we were really stretching to see what could we create in our children. Why should we pass on our limitations, was the attitude. We should not. And so there were lots of experiments going on with raising children. Some of them very, very successful.
Now, in regards to living longer, better health, things like that, was some of this kind of aided with medicine? I mean, we are such a dependent society on medication.
Nope, there was no medication. Everything was done with frequencies. People ate, I think, only really good food. They didn't eat much. There was... for instance, my own self, just in this last year, I've taken up the practice of sun gazing. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. I'm not very far into it because this has been a miserable winter and there hasn't been any sun. But, there's a fellow in India who, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Hira Ratan Manek, M-A-N-E-K. But he has developed an ability to live by looking at the sun and feeding from the light of the sun. And he is busy. I think there's something in the neighborhood of 25,000 people around the globe that are now practicing this sun gazing in an effort to learn how to move beyond what we're doing and enter into, he said, after 3 months you enter into peace of mind. Emotional stuff goes away, drama goes away, depression goes away. After the next 3 months, 6 months into it, the body heals. And if you continue on into the third quarter, your need for food begins to drop away to almost nothing.
I have heard of this, yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm experimenting. I've been a researcher into consciousness for 30 years now. So I am looking at that and saying, I don't teach anything unless I have developed, some expertise with it myself. And I very openly tell people, well, I don't know. Or if I do know, then I'll say, well, this is what I've learned. This is what I've experienced. So.
Well, what you were talking about some of the things that you see today that definitely gives credibility to what the 7 little people in brown robes had shared with you. Can you give us some of those examples? Exactly what you're talking about?
Well, I think probably one of the most obvious things that that they showed me was that there were just no jobs. I mean, there was this point where what I saw was children shooting school children and bombs going off in buildings and corporations shrinking and people not having enough to eat and not having any money. And at the time, I was very, very disturbed by that. They went into great detail about kings and leaders and what a king and a good leader would be, and what a bad king or bad leader would be, or a bad president. And what I see at this point in time is that I've been watching now some of the things they showed me, kids shooting kids in school. That's been going on for 20 years. Bombs going off in buildings, whether you're talking about the Hurrah building or, someplace else in the world, or the Trade Center in New York. That was all part of some of the stuff that I saw. The Berlin Wall, they said that will come down, and I watched that coming down, and then I was in Germany just before it came down, so it was like, oh my gosh. There were lots and lots of squabbles that I saw between people and corporations over rights. There was, in fact, this whole thing on rights that they took me into, talking about what happens when you begin to fight over the rights to something instead of sharing. They could not understand and did not see any logic in some of our competitive ways. And they said that our competition would kill us. And if we did not learn to cooperate and share everything and copy everything, that we would just do ourselves in, and we would see that too late. So, I look at some of that happening. There was a point where, I could see that people were just streaming out of offices and companies with their last paycheck. And, and nobody, what strikes me now as I look at it, and I hear, so many millions or so many thousands, laid off or without a job.
Right.
Is that we have evolved this whole thing about jobs and have completely ignored the fact that we may or may not have a job, but there's always a lot of work to be done. And the Robes insisted that the corporation was just a practice organization that would teach us to work together and coordinate together, and that there was going to come a time when we would have to organize ourselves as if we were a corporation, but without the idea of the paycheck, without the idea of the competition, without the idea that we were doing it because we had to survive.
Right.
They said, nope, you're going to have to learn to do that cooperatively. And so those are some of the things that I look out at the world and I think, well, we have a ways to go.
Yes. Now, what I'm an IT guy. I work in a lot with technology. What about technology? I know you had mentioned a mirror earlier that you could see your aura. That's kind of interesting.
Yes, the technology of the future is absolutely fabulous. The global network, the internet, what they called it the global network back in the 80s. It didn't really have that term yet. But the technology that I saw was stunning. People were talking over their televisions. I see we're getting closer and closer to that. Education came over the television, and I think virtual reality and artificial intelligence were developed to an extraordinary degree. We're not too far away, and probably a couple of years ago, I saw this little bitty notice that IBM had taken out the first patent on a technology that they hoped would lead to being able to manifest something out of thin air. that they were exploring and experimenting with being able to create a matrix of frequencies around which the molecules would solidify, and then the object would appear, and they would, be able to make something out of nothing without having to dig up the earth and transport, stuff all over the place. That doesn't happen in the future. That is not part of the future. Everything is done with frequencies. Kids talk to other kids. School, it would happen in such a way that kids in Iran and kids in Australia and kids in the U.S. would all get together to work on a project, and then they would share that the results. Kids did some powerful things with technology. They were very creative. The counterpoint to that, which I thought was astounding, was the focus on early education was all about learning how to survive on the globe, on a planet, with the earth and with the soil, raising animals, raising food, healing people. That sort of thing was primary education. The technology was woven through there. But if you didn't know how to survive in harmony with Mother Nature, then you were considered to be an at-risk child.
Well, I tell you what, this is just very fascinating stuff. We only have a few more minutes left, so one more time. The book we've been talking about tonight is Robes, a book of coming changes by Penny Kelly. So can you give us the website where if anyone's interested in maybe looking at this and as well as your other books? I know we didn't get a chance really to get into consciousness and energy, which,
that's all right.
that leaves us open for a whole other show, right?
Okay, yep, it does. And the website is www.lilyhillfarm.org, and that's LILYHILLFARM.org. And the books are all on Amazon as well. And I think in all of them, you can look inside the book. So I don't know how far that goes. If maybe you can only see the table of contents. But I think there's a couple pages that might be available to look at.
Well, good, and it is definitely a very interesting read. It can make you think. I have to say, make you really take a step back and analyze where exactly we are heading as a whole, as a global community. So
yeah, and I think if there was anything I would emphasize, it would be that if it makes you stand back and makes you think and makes you take a look at the bigger picture, which it certainly did for me, back then the question to ask yourself is, what do you want to create? What could be? What would be the ideal way to live? Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is what we have to ask ourselves and then answer and then begin to put it into form here.
Mm-hmm. Well, Penny, I like I said, I really appreciate you joining us tonight, and I look forward to having you back on because, like I said, I really wanted to get into the conscious and energy, but we're having some great questions from the chat room as well, and so that's always wonderful. So again, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Well, everyone, thanks so much for tuning in tonight. This has been Shadows in the Dark. Don't forget to join us this Thursday. Let me get my days right. Yes, this Thursday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We've got a lot of great things coming up. Don't forget we are planning our 24-hour broadcast, which will be April the 18th. We will be broadcasting from Ripley's Believe It or Not in St. Augustine. So you can sign up for our forum, our newsletter, and keep up to date on that. Just go to www.shadowsinthedarkradio.com, and you'll see the links for the forum there, as well as check out our web store. A lot of great stuff in there. We just added some new books, part of the Weird U.S. series, so make sure to check it out. And please take the time. Go check out lilyhillfarm.org. Lily has one L, so LILYHILL farm.org. The book we talked about tonight, Robes, a book of coming changes. It is a very good read. It definitely will get you to thinking, so make sure to check that out. Well, again, everybody, thank you so much, and thanks to Penny Kelly for joining us. This has been Shadows in the Dark, and always remember to be watchful of those shadows in the dark. Good night, everyone.
Shadows in the dark. dark.